This would be so great if this is actually all working. I think it is. Woo, woo. All right, awesome. Okay, so how is everybody? All right, so hold on. I need to mute my sound. There we go. Okay. All right, so today is Wednesday. So today is ADHD Real Talk, formerly Topic Tuesday. And so I wanted to welcome everybody. And if you are new here, my name is Jory Houlihan. I'm your guide for the dopamine deprived. I am an ADHD life coach, speaker, host of the podcast ADHD and ... with Jory Houlihan, as well as a fellow late diagnosed ADHDer. So as you join, say hi in the comments. I would also tell me where you're from. I would love to know. I always love seeing who is here with us. So let me know. All righty. So I believe I am ready to rock and roll here. All right. So today we are going to have a real conversation about something that usually happens in the more quiet moments after you get your ADHD diagnosis. So on this week's podcast, I talk about the identity shift that tends to come with this. And so we're going to talk about that more here. We talk a lot about the logistics of ADHD, right? We talk about the browser in your brain that has 47,000 tabs open. We talk about why we can't focus on boring tasks or why we're late for everything. But we rarely talk about the identity crisis that comes after you get that diagnosis. I want to ask you guys, a question. So, when you first suspected that you had ADHD, or when you finally got that paper from the doctor, what did it feel like? Did you feel like you had to mourn the person you thought you were? Did you feel relieved? So, type a yes in the chat if you felt that you had to mourn, okay? Or in the comments. Because here's the reality about this. You have spent, for some of us, decades, right, writing a story about ourselves. And usually those of us who are diagnosed later in life, that story is not terribly kind. And the story usually sounds something like, I'm lazy. I just need to try harder. I'm flaky. I'm just not cut out for adulting. Sure, in fact, I know I have said all of those things plus some throughout my entire life. So we internalize those things, right? We made them a part of our identity. We apologize for them constantly. And then all of a sudden we have this diagnosis. And we then realize that the quote unquote laziness was actually executive dysfunction, right? The flakiness was time blindness or emotional dysregulation struggles. You realize that you weren't really broken. Well, you may not completely realize it. You consciously know, but it still takes a while to really accept that part. But you do start to understand that you are wired differently and you've been trying to operate in a system that wasn't designed for you. Okay? So this all sounds like it should be purely good news, right? Now you finally you understand what's going on. It sounds like this should be a celebration, and it can be. But for a lot of us, it feels more like grief. Okay, so I want to be real about my own experience with this. I was diagnosed, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago now. And when I was diagnosed, my brain didn't know whether to celebrate or whether to mourn. So it just did both. At first, it felt like a relief, right? I thought, okay, this totally explains my entire life. There was just, oh, okay, now I get it. I realized I could stop doing things like taking all these personal development courses that I had spent, I don't even want to know how much time and money on over the years, because they never worked for me because they weren't designed for how my brain works. But then a few months later, I decided I wanted to try medication because just knowing I had ADHD was not doing much of anything, and I was just drowning. And at the encouragement of a friend, I said, "Okay, let me try it." And it changed everything for me. It was also the first time I realized that this is what neurotypical people function like naturally. This is how their brain works naturally, or well, not completely, but much better than my own, right? And I that was when I got angry. I realized I had been walking around my entire life with my hands tied behind my back and didn't realize it. I mean, no wonder I was so freaking tired. I started asking questions like, why didn't anyone see this earlier? I mean, especially when you finally know all the signs, you're like, how did no one see this? Seriously. Why did my doctors dismiss me? What could my life have looked like if I had known earlier? Now, these are questions that I am never going to know the answers to, obviously. However, that anger was valid. That grief for the lost time was valid. I felt like I was starting over at 50. I see a lot of people in the online space trying to sort of skip over this part. They want to jump straight to the ADHD is a superpower narrative. I have nothing there are strengths. Absolutely there are strengths. But you're going to have a much harder time finding them until you process the fact that you are in a sense rebuilding your sense of self from the ground up. That's a lot. Once you know you have ADHD, you can't unsee it. I mean, you start to see it everywhere, right? You start seeing what your patterns are. You take a look at your past, right? Maybe jobs or relationships that you either stayed in for too long or left too early. You think about your messy apartment, right? Or opportunities that you missed because maybe you were late for an interview. But now you're seeing them through this new lens. You weren't a quitter. You weren't morally flawed because you struggled to keep your apartment clean. You weren't irresponsible because you were late to that job interview. You were just unsupported and didn't understand how your brain worked. So, where do we go from here? Right? Because it can be really easy to get stuck in this grieving, angry place. And while you do have to experience it, it is also really important to move forward. So how do we stop looking backward and the what might have beens and start looking forward? The biggest shift I want to offer you today is moving from critical to curious. So when we operate from our old identity, right? We are critical. We ask, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Why can't I get my shit together? And those questions are a trap. They just lead to shame. And we've had enough of the shame. We just need to leave that in the rearview mirror, right? I want you to start asking yourself, how does my brain actually work? Be curious about it because it's fascinating. It really is. Now, first of all, asking that question, this gives you agency. You get to decide who you are now. You get to choose which parts of your old story you want to keep and which parts you want to throw away. So maybe you keep the creativity. Maybe you keep the ability to make connections that other people miss. But maybe you throw away the label of lazy. You throw away the label of irresponsible, right? You are the same person you were before the diagnosis. You just have better information now so that you can start to make better choices for yourself. All right, so I know this I know this is a pretty heavy topic for a random Wednesday, but it is so important. If you are in that messy middle phase, right, where you are relieved to know, but angry about the past, first, I want you to know that you are not alone. I mean, you are definitely not alone. If you are ready to stop just intellectually understanding your ADHD, that's what I call preparing to prepare mode, or what my friend Christy Huss calls procrastinating. Isn't that a fabulous word? Ugh, I love that word. Anyway, so we want to stop procrastinating and actually start building a life that supports you with your ADHD. And there are some things that you can do. The first thing I do recommend is, if you can, get a therapist. Okay. The therapist is going to help you navigate the emotional terrain of all of this. This is a lot. This is a lot. And trying to do it on your own is you're going to feel like you're beating your head against the wall. You don't know the right questions to ask yourself, right? So, a well trained therapist, somebody who understands what ADHD looks like in women in particular, can be an amazing resource for you. And while I understand that not everybody likes talk therapy, which is fine, there are so many other therapies out there. There's art therapy, there's music therapy, there's equine therapy, there's so many therapies. So find one that works for you because I promise you it will be completely worth it. I also recommend getting a coach, whether it's me or somebody else, because we can help you to understand your day-to-day patterns, right? How your how your ADHD looks day to day so that you can then begin to answer that question of how does my brain actually work, right? If you don't take action, nothing is going to change. There are so many people, and I was one of them, I admit it, that kind of thought once I got the diagnosis that somehow things would just magically start getting better. It doesn't work that way. You have to learn how your brain works. Otherwise, you're going to stay where you are. Nothing is going to change. The only thing that's changed is now you know for a fact you have ADHD. Okay. So if you are interested in working with me, I do have something called the Clarity and Action Intensive. This isn't about giving you a generic planner. It is about sitting down and looking at your specific brain, stripping away those old stories about being broken, because you're not broken. You're definitely not broken. And then we create strategies that work for you specifically. So if you are tired of the identity crisis and ready for action, please check it out. I will put the link in the comments. Regardless, I really want you to take ownership of your ADHD. Like I said, it isn't going to get better if you don't do anything. So, at the very least, start checking out where you might find a therapist. Psychology Today actually has some pretty good listings for that kind of thing. Um, but I want you all to feel empowered with your ADHD. And it is not a one size fits all thing. And it isn't you're going to have this all figured out by the end of the weekend kind of thing. This takes time. You have been the way you are your entire life. You have a lot of muscle memory and a lot of other memories that you have to kind of reboot. All right. So don't be afraid to ask for the help that you need. We're not great at asking for help, folks. We are terrible about asking for it. So I am telling you, there is no shame in asking for help. Okay? All right. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I know this was kind of a heavy topic, but I hope that you were able to get something out of it. And be gentle with yourselves this week, especially I live in the Chicago suburbs. It's a balmy 11 degrees. It's going to be like this until Monday. Anyway, so be gentle with yourselves. This sucks. This weather's terrible. So, anyway, be gentle with yourselves. Have some self compassion. I will see you next time. And until then, stay curious. Are you kidding me? Mm.